So impressions. I don't do comedy. What was interesting about today was there was a theme. It didn't matter if it was a technical talk or if it was a non-technical talk. It came down to, I can sum it up, at least what I got out of it, from this quote from Jerry Weinberg. Does anybody know who Jerry Weinberg is? So he's been a huge influence on my career and the events that him and his colleagues put on. And whatever the problem is, it's always a people problem. The technical stuff, I mean, we're all smart people, we can figure that stuff out. Where we're left with, most of the time, in some of the hallway conversations that I've had and things elsewhere, is we're still stuck with this question, right? We have a pretty good idea about how we can make our architecture more testable. Daniel talked a lot about context in his talk that just happened, and thanks for switching it to English. I hope no one else was confused by that. I think when he asked, everyone looked at me. Who would prefer that I do this in English? And all the guys went, I'm like, sorry, because I'm Canadian, we have to apologize for everything. So sorry for saying sorry. But we're always stuck with, how can I get other people to do that? And a couple of quick stories before we bring the people up for the lightning talks. A team I worked with in 2009, some people asked, how do we do this? How do I get my team to move towards building these types of tests when we don't do that today? We just had an informal rule that leave it better than how you found it. So we didn't go on these big missions to hunt down and eradicate our hotspots. We found out what those were, and then when it came time to modify a component, we agreed that given a time box on it and pairing up, what can we do to leave it better than how we found it? So over time, instead of rewriting completely or coming up with a technical debt eradication plan, little slices at a time that will add up. And it was just a team agreement. We didn't ask for permission. We didn't seek approval from the product owner. And an interesting thing that happened in this large organization was the team was delivering at a rate that was outpacing the pace of the organization. So we had 2 full 2-week sprints to just work on whatever we wanted because they couldn't feed us stuff fast enough. So we always maintained a technical health backlog. A colleague of mine, Declan Whalen, is trying to change the conversation from technical debt towards technical health to put more of a positive spin on it. But we just did that ourselves as a team, and it took one catalyst on the team to say, maybe we should try this. And then we tried it, and it worked. But there was still that one mover. Sometimes people ask, not how can I get my team to do this, but how can I get permission to refactor? How can I get permission to build a new test harness? How can I get permission for this, that, and the other? Who knows Cheesy? Jeff Morgan. He wrote Cucumbers and Cheese, the book. And in his world, that's just what you do. If you're talking to somebody in marketing, do they need permission to format their document a certain way? No. What about legal? No. It's just part of the job. So technical health and technical excellence is our responsibility. We don't ask if we should test first. If we believe that's the best way to do it, we do it. But here we are again. Yeah. Sounds pretty easy to say there. But how still can I get those people too? Because I'd argue that, who's being forced to be here today? Who would actually admit it? Who's been sent here by their company because you had to come here and learn? And now you have to go back and do an hour lunch and learn on what you learned because that was part of the deal of the company paying for you. Anybody? Everybody close their eyes. And somebody raise their hand if they want to admit it. Okay. So we're all movers. We want to learn these ideas, and we want to go back and figure out how do we get the people in our organization to do it. I talked to Victor, where is Victor? Over lunch. We both went to this conference called PSL. And it's run by Jerry Weinberg, Esther Derby, Johanna Rothman, Don Gray, and another conference called AYE. That was those same folks and Steve Smith. And I remember the first time I went, it was my first experiential conference. And part of the deal was it's only 74 people that are allowed to go, so it's very small. And you get to have a one-on-one with those folks. So I remember being so jazzed up, my brain ready to explode about all these ideas that I could go back to my organization. And I asked, I was having a chat with Esther, and I said, so how can I go back and convince them to? And she said, Jason, it's not about you. And that just blew my mind, and that completely changed my stance as an agent of change. So before we get the lightning talk folks on stage, a couple of things that I've learned along the way that you might find helpful to have those conversations. Like I said, the testing stuff, you can figure that out. How to build your continuous deployment pipeline, you can figure that stuff out. You still need to talk to people in the end. So some things that have worked very well for me. Number one, this is a fantastic book that I don't see anyone in Agile talking about. Each of the 99 ways is one page, and it's a way for you to have that conversation. And one of the interesting ones is beg. So I think it was Hoy that asked me, how can I see this problem, how can I convince my team? And in her book, one of the ideas is just beg. Say, my certainty is greater than your doubt. What's the worst that can happen? So taking ideas from Daniel's talk. Will a plane crash if you experiment? Well, then maybe it's not a good idea. If you're building a media player, who cares? So I can't get my Britney Spears track or something for 5 seconds. I can wait. So beg. There's an interesting Professor Fogg, who has a behavior model called the Fogg model, oddly enough. Piggyback new rituals on top of existing ones. So Lean Coffee that we did out there. I use Lean Coffee in every organization. And instead of interrupting time on people's schedule, straddle on and off hours. And what I mean by that is if people normally start at 9 o'clock, have a Lean Coffee from 8:30 to 9:15 and see who shows up. Try to ask functional managers or directors or VPs or whoever you're working with if you can take the last 10 minutes of their weekly status meeting to show an idea or to do a lightning talk. So piggyback rituals on top of other ones. In his view, it was things like, has anybody been crazy enough to try and quit drinking coffee? So instead of trying to change the behavior, if your ritual is to stumble down in the morning and open up the cupboard and then grab the coffee and make everything, put a big pink sticky note in the cabinet saying, stop doing this. You have to develop a trigger, but you're not trying to completely change something. You're leveraging an existing ritual that you don't think about to poke your brain and give yourself a reminder about it. So you can do things like that. A really good way to do it is you grab this awesome book that has a yellow cover by this really cool, charismatic Canadian, and you leave it on somebody's desk, or you leave it out in the lunch area where you know the manager is going to come by to discover it. That's very creepy. But the really creepy way is to use the stalking method. So one organization, I wanted to get connected to one of the lead architects, and we sat on the same floor. So I would sit there at like 4:20 waiting, because that's, 4:30, it was ghost town, because it was a government organization. And I sit there, and I'm watching, and I'm like, all right, let's get this coat. Okay, cool, just walking towards the elevator. And I just meet him at the elevator. And then I got 30 seconds, because I'm a weird antisocial Canadian person, so I can't just walk up to someone and say, oh, hey, how's it going? Can we chat about whatever? That's just, doesn't compute. So I need an excuse, or I need something. So the stalking method is a really good way to influence change in your organization. And the second part is to start smoking. So any organizational change course will tell you that the most important conversations happen while the smokers are out there gathering, because you've got the most diverse set of people in the smokers area. So start smoking. It's very healthy, and you can learn a lot about how your organization can work. Cut that part out of the video too. And lastly, get curious, not furious. When you're trying to influence change and you feel somebody's being resistant, flip the question around. Ask a question about, well, why won't this work? What is it about this approach that we could tweak to make it work, instead of trying to attack that?